This is The Briefing with Steve Scully on POTUS, SiriusXM Channel 124, and anytime on the SXM app.
So earlier today, two House Democrats, they are both Jewish, introducing a resolution condemning a Republican bill that would expel Palestinians from the U.S. Pleased to welcome an immigration attorney and expert on this, Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch. Hey, Kate, welcome to The Briefing. Thank you very much for being with us.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Let me begin with the backstory. This proposal being put forth by Congressman Ryan Zinke, Republican of Montana, and a handful of other Republican co-sponsors that would do what?
So this is a bill that would expel Palestinians from the U.S. and also block Palestinians from entering the U.S. So it's an immigration-style bill that would ban visa approvals and any other types of entries to the United States by Palestinians, and also it would kick out any Palestinians who have already been invited, who are here on a visa or are asylees or refugees, in fact.
So you're an expert on immigration. What does the law allow? If you come here on a visa, can you be expelled?
No. You know, we saw this, there have been several iterations of this over the centuries in the United States. The first was the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, and at the time that law stood. But the most recent example was during the Trump administration, where he, had the Muslim ban, banning people from Iraq, Syria, Iran, Sudan, Libya. And that was a bill, or I'm sorry, it wasn't a bill. That was an executive action that was passed under Trump that was blocked by the federal courts. And so in all likelihood, I don't think this bill would make it through Congress, of course, but even if it did, I don't think the federal courts would allow it to go all the way through.
Well, clearly Democrats would line up against this measure, and we should point out, fewer than 12 Republicans have signed on to the bill. But it's interesting, based on all that we've seen over the last month and a half inside Gaza and the horrors the Palestinian people have dealt with. Certainly, it all began with Hamas and the horrors that they inflicted on the Israeli people. But I'm wondering how this plays out in terms of the politics of it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, politics are at play here, and what we know about immigration is that, involving politics or religious banning or, bans like that just don't work historically. We look back on, we banned Jewish refugees during the Holocaust, and every sort of iteration of this in history was a bad idea, and we're experiencing that again now. And of course, this is what's happening in Gaza and in Israel is an incredibly hot topic that people have lots of strong feelings about. But the solution to that is not to ban swaths of people because they come from a particular country. That's just not how immigration has worked, should work. It's not good policy.
And Kate, can you educate us on what the courts have said in the past about this, potentially what the courts could say if something like this, unlikely as it is, would pass the House of Representatives?
Sure. I mean, what we have is the most recent Muslim ban under the Trump administration, and that was a lot easier for the courts to block because that was an executive action. And, I haven't gone back recently and read the decision at that point. We were so busy as immigration lawyers during the Trump administration and keeping up with all of the executive actions and all of the court decisions, but most of the federal court decisions enjoining or blocking Trump-era policies were because it was an executive reach. It was an overstep. And so that probably was a significant portion of the decision at the time. Now, what we're looking at here, again, an unlikely bill to pass through Congress, but if this legislation were to get passed, of course, it wouldn't be a presidential executive action. It would be a congressional law, and so the courts would have to look at that from a different angle. My expectation is that they would still find the law illegal under certain, elements, because it's just not the way that our immigration system functions. We don't, as a nation, ban people from particular countries. It's just not how the system works.
And so, again, the development in all of this, you have two members of Congress, Greg Landsman of Ohio, Dan Goldman of New York. They are both very pro-Israel. They are both Jewish. I mention that because they're also offering a resolution basically condemning Republicans, including Ryan Zinke, for this this move in the House of Representatives. Again, just giving you a sense of the politics behind all of this. But if you are a Palestinian, Kate, in the U.S. right now, in this environment, what should these citizens, these residents, these Palestinians know?
Well, I don't think that there is cause for alarm because of this bill. I don't think that it's going to make its way through Congress. I think it's very unlikely, under the current structure of our nation, that Palestinians will be banned. Certainly people who are already in the United States from Palestine will be sent out of the country. Now, whether that remains to be true, next year, after a new presidential election, et cetera, no one can answer those questions. But my main message for the moment would be not to worry too much about this bill that is unlikely to become a law. There are other concerns, of course, for Palestinian people in the United States who are feeling under attack in other ways, of course. But I think my main message is it's unlikely that actual legal status is going to be revoked anytime soon for Palestinians.
And part of that, when you mention under attack, is playing out along the southern border. You are in Austin, Texas, and this is a looming issue, an ongoing issue in Texas, in Arizona, in California. So again, a very different set of circumstances for the Palestinians, but is there any parallel to how this is playing out on immigration issues and visas along the border?
Sure. I mean, in Texas, what we have along the border are asylum seekers. Most of them are from South and Central America, and there's an extreme anti-immigrant sentiment and backlash in my state, in the state of Texas, when we see things like, the governor with Operation Lone Star spending $10 billion enforcing immigration along the border. And in fact, just last week, the governor signed SB 4, which is Texas's version of the Show Me Your Papers law, which authorizes law enforcement in the state of Texas to arrest and charge people with illegal entry into the country. So we're experiencing some extreme anti-immigrant actions and sentiment here in Texas, and those, while it's not directed specifically at Palestinians here, it's a similar mentality, similar sentiment, and again, it's something that we've seen throughout the centuries in our nation. And you can look at the ways that people talked about, Irish Catholics in the 1700s, and Italian and Chinese immigrants and Jewish immigrants in the 1800s, and now Latin American immigrants in the 1900s, and the rhetoric is repeated. It's based on tribalism and fear. And again, back to this is why we have an immigration legal system that doesn't allow for politics to get in the way and to ban people because of particular incidents or because they are of a particular religion or from a particular country, because that is not the way that our nation functions, and it's not the way that our laws function.
Really appreciate you being with us. Joining us from Texas is Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch. And look, a first-time guest here on the briefing, so I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about your podcast, Law Moms Out Loud. So what's that all about?
Sure. So I'm a lawyer and a mom, and my co-host and I, we realized that, as law moms, we're really terrific lawyers, and we're pretty great at being moms, and we sometimes ignore ourselves. And so the podcast is really about living a full life as a law mom that doesn't ignore, yourself, your personhood.
Well, thank you very much for being with us. Again, an issue that is probably not going anywhere, but we want to educate our audience on the politics as it moves through Washington, D.C., and we appreciate your perspective. Kate, have a great week. Thank you very much.